Have you ever noticed how some people seem to have a strange kind of power over everything around them? They don't need to talk. They don't yell or beg. They just step back quietly, and suddenly the mood changes. People start feeling confused, curious, even emotional. Now, imagine if you did that. What if you stopped reacting so quickly to everything? What if you stayed silent instead of replying right away? What if you stepped back instead of blowing up? What do you think would happen? That's the real point here. When you're not always available, emotionally, physically, mentally, people get uncomfortable. They're used to managing you through your reactions, your emotions, your predictability. But the moment you choose to pull back, everything shifts. People who thought they understood you suddenly realize they don't know you at all. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves." Now ask yourself this. When you become hard to reach, who starts to panic? Who gets annoyed? Who tries to push your buttons just to get some kind of emotion from you? That says more about them than about you. It also shows how easily you're still being controlled without even knowing it. You keep giving yourself away to keep the peace, to avoid losing people. People who deep down were never truly there for you. And every time you force yourself to say yes, every time you react too quickly, every time you get emotional, you give away a piece of your energy. And what are you left with? Exhaustion, frustration, a strange emptiness you can't explain. But here's why. You're giving too much of yourself to people who don't even deserve a moment of your silence. This message isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about choosing yourself. It's about starting what Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming your full, real, complete self. And that journey begins when you realize silence can be more powerful than endless arguments. That's stepping back, not because you're running away, but because you're aware, is a strong and powerful act. So let me ask you this, straight and clear. How long will you let other people control your emotions? How long will you let yourself be pulled like a puppet every time someone touches your emotional scars? Maybe now is the time to cut those strings, to step back, to stop being so easy to read, because when you're no longer always available, everything starts to change. You've been taught your whole life to always be there for others, to reply right away, to say yes even when you want to say no. Since childhood, you've been made to believe that your value depends on how much you give, how present you are for others. But here's something most people never tell you clearly. Being too available isn't a strength, it's a trap. And as long as you believe you have to be emotionally or physically available all the time, people will use you, drain you, and forget you when you're no longer useful. And do you know why? But you don't see it, because you still believe that if you're always there for others, someone will finally be there for you. But life doesn't work that way. Carl Jung spoke about the persona, this mask we wear to be accepted, loved, recognized, and it is exactly this mask that keeps you overly available. You say it's okay when you are suffocating. You respond to messages immediately, even when you are exhausted. People who want you available all the time, in fact, do not want you. They want what you provide: validation, company, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you change, when you set a boundary, when you refuse to react, those same people get irritated, accuse you, say you are weird. It's not because you changed, it's because you stopped being functional for them. And here's the cruelest point. The more available you are, the less value others give you, because what is too abundant becomes emotional rag. No one respects what they don't have to earn. No one values what is always there. So now, stop and think. Who truly deserves your time? Who deserves your attention, your presence, your listening? Or better yet, who deserves your absence? But before answering that, we need to understand one essential thing. Why do we react so much? Why do we give in so easily? What is behind this almost automatic desire to respond, justify, and please? The answer lies in what Carl Jung called psychic energy, And that is what we will talk about in the next part. Because your energy is all you have, and if you don't learn to protect it, someone will use it against you. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Every time you react impulsively, you are wasting psychic energy. When you defend yourself against criticism that didn't even deserve attention, when you respond to a provocation just to prove you are right, when you engage in useless discussions, when you try to please those who do not value you, you are spending your inner strength on what does not nourish you. And Jung was clear that which you resist persists. The more you react, the more you bind yourself. People who live emotionally drained are not weak. They are misdirected. And do you know what happens to someone who lives exhausted? They become vulnerable. And when you are vulnerable, you become easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy people can sense this. They notice that you do not know how to guard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're always trying to solve the world, and they take advantage of it. Jung said that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to keep energy within the system. This means knowing how to say no without guilt, knowing how to remain silent without feeling cowardly, knowing how to observe before acting, because true power is not in reacting. It is in choosing when and how to act. And this is only possible when you know yourself well enough to recognize your own impulses. How many times have you lost sleep over an unresolved conversation? How many times have you spent hours ruminating on what you should have said, or trying to understand why someone treated you poorly? This is energy being drained without return. You are keeping alive ghosts that should have died long ago and feeding dynamics that only exist because you insist on responding. Psychic energy is like a force field. When well guarded, it creates presence. You enter a room and command respect without saying a word. But when poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile, and the world has no mercy for those who give in easily. Therefore, start observing your own triggers. What makes you react automatically? What makes you lose your center? These are the exact points where your energy escapes, and that is where you need to work, not to become cold or indifferent, but to be selective, to be sovereign over yourself. And here comes one of Jung's greatest revelations. When you conserve your energy, you break the projections that others place upon you, and that bothers a lot. Because now we are entering a dark territory, that of silent manipulation. In the next part, we will explore how opportunistic people feed off your energy, and why your unavailability completely disarms these games. Get ready to look into the eyes of those who have always drained you without you realizing it. You think you are in control. You believe your reactions are conscious choices, but the truth is darker. Most of your emotional responses are programmed, and those who understand this manipulate you easily. Opportunistic people don't need to raise their voices, threaten, or force situations. They just trigger the buttons you've left exposed, and you react always. Carl Jung called this projection, the psychological mechanism through which people project onto others what they cannot see in themselves. But there is another side to this phenomenon that few notice. While others project onto you, you also become the receptacle for these images. And the more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas for these projections. The most effective manipulation doesn't happen in shouting. It happens in the silence of guilt. When you feel that you owe something to the other, when you believe you need to be available, need to help, need to understand, even when it destroys you inside. And here is the central point. The manipulator doesn't need to control you. They just need you to keep reacting the same way. But when you stop reacting, the game breaks. When you start saying no, responding with silence, withdrawing instead of explaining yourself, the projections begin to crumble. The mask they put on you falls, and this leaves people unsettled because they no longer know who you are. And worse, now they are forced to look at themselves, and not everyone is prepared for that. Your unavailability is a threat because it forces others to confront their own emptiness. The silence you offer reveals the internal noise they don't want to hear. And then comes the attack, the criticism, the emotional drama, not because you are wrong, but because you stopped serving as a convenient mirror. Jung said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the cycle, the other's shadow begins to emerge, and this is unbearable for those who have always used you as an escape. But what about you? Are you ready to deal with the discomfort of being misunderstood, rejected, or even attacked for protecting yourself? Are you ready to endure the silence that comes after the rupture? And that is what we will talk about now. The modern world is noisy. Everyone wants to be heard, wants to respond quickly, wants to win pointless debates and prove their point, even if it costs them their own peace. But there is a power that few know, and even fewer master, the power of silence. Not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence, the kind of silence that is not absence but amplified presence. Jung saw silence not as a void, but as a fertile ground for inner transformation. When you stop reacting, you begin to observe, and by observing, you see patterns that previously went unnoticed. Emotional repetitions, manipulation games, cycles of self-sabotage. Silence allows for lucidity, and lucidity is dangerous for those who live to control you. Have you noticed how some people panic when you don't respond, when you don't explain yourself, when you simply disappear? It's not because they miss you, it's because your silence takes away their narrative control. While you speak, you are still in the game. But when you are silent, you change the rules, and that unbalances anyone who thrives on your reaction. True silence is not the absence of voice. It is mastery over one's own energy. It is the refusal to be dragged down by someone else's emotions. It is the conscious choice not to engage in battles that are not worth your wear. Jung said that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, requires this distancing, because only in silence can you listen to yourself without the world's interference. But don't be fooled. Silence has a price. It will distance you from people who only valued you for the role you played. It will make you incomprehensible to those who only saw you through their own projections. It will make you seem cold, distant, arrogant. But all of this is a reaction from those who never wanted to deal with your depth, only with your utility. But the most powerful silence is not the one that disturbs the other. It is the silence that reconstructs you from within, the silence that connects you to something beyond external approval. It is in this internal space, free from others' demands, that you begin to recover your vital energy, to reconnect with your essence. And this is precisely what we will talk about in the next part, because it's not enough to just cut out external noise. You need to relearn how to use your energy consciously, to choose where it goes, where it stays, and most importantly, where it should never be wasted. It's time to learn to be selective with your own soul. If you're in the process of reclaiming your energy and setting boundaries, you'll find real value in my book, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's most important ideas and gives you tools to protect your energy, set boundaries, and reconnect with your true self. Link is in the pinned comment. It's no use understanding all of this intellectually if in practice you continue saying yes when you mean no, responding to messages that bother you, participating in empty conversations, and maintaining relationships that only exist out of inertia. Awareness without action is just another form of self-deception. True transformation begins when you firmly decide to become selective, and this requires emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability is not about being cold, arrogant, or indifferent. It's about no longer being accessible to anyone at any time for any reason. It's about taking control of your own energy, your own time, your own peace. And this starts with small actions, not responding immediately, breathing before reacting, leaving a discussion before being dragged into chaos, turning off your phone without guilt, saying not today, saying I'm not interested, saying I won't get involved. But here's the most important part. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to explain your silence. You owe nothing to anyone but yourself. And this, for many people, is unforgivable, because when you refuse to explain yourself, you take away the other person's power to keep you within an emotional narrative where you are always the helpful, understanding, accessible one. Carl Jung understood that every process of individuation goes through isolation, but not a depressive isolation, a sacred isolation, a time of inner retreat where you relearn to listen to your own voice without the world's interference, where you rebuild your identity not based on the gaze of others, but from your own center. Want to know a good thermometer for your evolution? Observe who starts to distance themselves from you when you become more reserved. Observe who tries to provoke you when you stop reacting. Observe who accuses you of having changed when you finally start to protect yourself. These are not signs that you are wrong. They are proof that you have begun to free yourself. Being unavailable is uncomfortable. At first, you will feel guilty. You will think you are being selfish. You will hear that you are being too harsh. But this is part of the deconstruction process. You have spent your life being conditioned to put yourself second. It's natural that change causes discomfort, not only in you, but in everyone who benefited from your old version. Conscious unavailability is the foundation of self-determination. When you say no to the world, you are saying yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you are reaffirming that your peace is worth more than any false connection. And when you stop explaining yourself, you begin to be respected, even if it's by few. But not everyone is ready for this type of presence, because your emotional absence will expose wounds they do not want to face. It will reveal how much they depended on your emotional chaos to feel in control. And it is at this moment that the rupture comes, and with the rupture comes the pain, the loneliness, the estrangement, the feeling that you are losing something, when in fact you are just freeing yourself. But what happens after that? What comes after the distancing? What is born from the silence? In the last part we will talk about this, about the rebirth that only happens when you have the courage to be misunderstood, to be alone, and to become whole on your own. It's time to understand why the loneliness of the strong is the path to true freedom. But slowly, that silence begins to change. It starts to clean out your mind, to calm your emotions, to help you heal. Then comes solitude. But not the kind where you're lonely. It's the kind where you're fully with yourself. A strong kind of solitude. The kind that belongs to someone who has stopped abandoning their own needs just to keep others happy. In that quiet space, where once there was confusion, you start to feel clear. Where you once felt anxious, you begin to feel calm. Where you used to feel needy, now you feel a new kind of strength. The strength of being enough for yourself. Carl Jung said that becoming your true self, what he called individuation, requires you to step away from the crowd for a while, to take off the mask, to walk your own path. And that's exactly what you do when you decide to become less available. You're not running away from life, you're coming back to yourself. The people who feel uneasy about your absence, they show you something important. They never really wanted you. They just wanted the part you played in their lives. And now that you're no longer playing that part, they don't know what to do with you. And that's actually freeing. Yes, you will lose people, but you will finally find yourself. You may walk away from certain places, but you'll reconnect with your true self. You might be misunderstood, but you'll start to be respected, because when you stop being available to everyone and everything, you become rare. You become valuable. You become unforgettable. And don't get it wrong. This is a rebirth, a fresh start, a new chapter where you're no longer accepting emotional scraps, games, or empty words pretending to be love. From now on, you only welcome what brings peace to your mind, truth to your heart, and wholeness to your soul. If you've made it this far, that means a part of you is already ready for this new way of living. A part of you already knows that being loved by others means nothing if it means you have to stop loving yourself. Real self-love begins the moment you choose you, even if it means being alone for a little while. Now tell me in the comments, are you ready to be misunderstood, rejected, or even disliked for the sake of your own freedom? Are you willing to pay the price of being your true self? I choose my peace. Let's see how many of us are ready to take this step. And don't forget, watch the next video. It matters more than you might think. See you there.